We'll give people maybe a few seconds more. But did want to say thank you all very much for joining. We're very excited today to be joined by an amazing team, an amazing group of women here who represent a lot of different aspects of the blockchain and the crypto industry, and will be able to share a lot of their insights on NFTs and DeFi. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. For those of you who aren't speaking, please keep yourselves on mute and your video off. That way we can have all the wonderful things that we're going to talk about clearly come through. And if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat. We want this to be as interactive a session as possible, and we will certainly answer those questions as we go along and try to answer everyone. So at this point, I want to thank everyone and have everyone introduce themselves to this session and discuss and hear where NFTs are headed, the infrastructure that's required, as well as the ways of managing the risk while exploring these different and new opportunities. So it's been a turbulent few months, but Web3 innovation continues to reach new levels. So if we can just go around and have each person introduce themselves. Cleve, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you so much for Karen for having me on and for putting together this conversation. I'm Cleve Mesidor. I'm the Executive Director for the Blockchain Foundation, which is different than the Blockchain Association. The Blockchain Foundation is a 501c3. We focus exclusively on education. We're actually building infrastructure for the general public so that they can get trusted content from reputable sources. Previously, I was an advisor for the Blockchain Association, the largest entity for the industry in Washington. Previously, I served in Congress for 2 members and also in the Obama administration as a presidential appointee. So it's great to work at the intersection of blockchain and public policy.
Thank you. And Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Emma Channing. I am a general counsel at ETHTrust, a custodian in the digital asset space.
Thank you. And Erica?
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Lacerenza, and also thank you to Karen for putting this on today. I'm a managing director at Deloitte. Deloitte is one of the largest professional services firms in the world, and we provide advisory, consulting, tax, audit services to companies across all of the industries. I've been with the firm for almost 15 years, where I've been in our financial services practice. And so, by background, I've spent a lot of time with companies in the traditional financial services space, but now I'm spending a lot of my time in the digital asset blockchain space, and super excited about the industry and also to be here today.
And Valerie.
Hey everyone, yeah, great to be here, and then thanks for Karen for putting this together and having me on. So my background is pretty much, I'm from the blockchain or crypto ecosystem, I would say. I helped build an exchange since 2018 from literally day one, and then that exchange, it's a top 10 global one. And then, so starting from there, I've been always using, looking for use cases for the technology for, crypto payment and this kind of thing. I arrived at the NFT. And so with the NFT infrastructure that I co-founded last year, which is the NFT Brewery, and then always looking for use cases for NFTs. So sort of always, running on the ground, looking for the real use cases for NFTs today.
Good. And I'm Karen. I am the co-founder of Blockchain by Women and currently CMO at Appdome. And Appdome provides mobile app security and fraud prevention for mobile apps. And as a number of NFTs and other crypto are being stored or transacted on wallets, it's something that is near and dear to my heart. and we'll be talking about the security aspects. So let's get started. What is the state of NFTs today? While some NFT use cases might have pulled off, what have you seen as the use cases that continue to thrive? And Valerie and Erica, if you could start us off here, and everyone else, please feel free to add in.
Yeah, so let me kick off this one. And then since I am always sort of in the forefront of, what's the adoption, what's the use cases. So what I have seen, from last year, also this year, I think we can still safely say that we are still very, very early collectively, right? So going through this generational transition, from the old tech to the new tech, and then so it's really, I would say still 99% of people still don't know what even NFTs are, and then but also at the same time, I can see that NFTs are actively adopted. Last year, I would say largely through those like a natural fit use cases like art, collectibles. That's why we saw, punks. We saw NBA Top Shots, right? And then we saw, digital native industries like gaming, play to earn as like such a phenomenon last year, right? But gradually, I would say, the end of last year, a symbolic thing to me is like a Gary V, which is like a big megaphone, from the marketing, now also, speaking a lot about NFTs and metaverses. And he announced his NFT membership restaurant. So now the message is now the consumers can actually enter NFTs, right? So without even knowing that's an NFT, so NFTs are now built into memberships. And so that's what we are seeing a lot this year. Brands are entering the NFT adoptions, right? Brands are announcing that they're having a partnership with protocols. And, so that's why this year we are seeing Tiffany, right? Working with punks, and we see Ticketmaster announcing they're doing NFT ticketing, things like that. So I would say NFTs, the trending really towards consumer side of it, trending towards brands are really adopting it as part of their business, and then becoming more and more mainstream. Yes, that's what I can see.
Thanks, Valerie. Maybe I can just add on to that. So I think, working with clients across the ecosystem, I would say that we're seeing interest and engagement really everywhere. And that's all the way from emerging disruptors to the enterprises across industries. I mean, media, tech, retail, you mentioned gaming, sports, entertainment. Clearly it started with the collectibles and art, like Valerie mentioned, because that's more of the simple use cases, I would say, that are easier to understand. But
right.
I think it is more than just a social craze. It really is, when you purchase an NFT, I think it's really about being a part of a community. And I think that that's something that we all, as humans, that's very natural for us to be a part of one and want to have that kind of experience. And so I view sort of the NFT 2.0 more about the experience and taking it to the next level. So when we think about enterprises, there's so many companies every day. There's companies that are announcing different partnerships or that they're launching NFTs. So, even Nike, right? They are one that maybe a few months back, but it's not just Nike. It's all of the companies thinking about whether it's, wearables and collectibles. So I think the metaverse Web 3.0, I think that the NFTs companies are starting to think about how that can kind of like create the bridge between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0. But I think that we'll see that consumer engagement and really that next level experience through NFTs. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about how, I live in New York City, and New York City Fashion Week is starting, and different brands like Vogue and others are announcing different events, and they're using NFTs. And so they're using NFTs for different experiences within New York City Fashion Week. So maybe as you're ticketing, but it doesn't just, the NFT doesn't just necessarily allow you a ticket to attend the fashion show. It's even taking it a step further and really providing you with the benefits past that point of sale. And so I think that that's something that we're going to continue to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree.
And so, as you guys have mentioned, businesses, enterprises are getting into NFTs. And we've seen BitGo recently announce their own NFT custody platform. Do you see other custodians developing similar platforms? And so I guess if we just pause there for a second, why would, or what kinds of institutions would be interested in NFTs? And then from there, what are the advantages and disadvantages of these different platforms?
I can jump in before we, I'd love to jump in before we get into the meat of it, because, I definitely see NFTs as a tool, but primarily as a tool for creators. I know the big brands are getting in, and, the enterprise ecosystem is growing. But, at the end of the day, NFTs continue to be an important tool for those creators who always had this important pain point, right? They couldn't protect their intellectual property, monetize it, and create a marketplace. And that has happened. And so what you've seen is this boom for not just creators, but America's economy as well, because for cities, their creative industries have been very critical to their growth. So I do think that as we're seeing the enterprise explosion into this space, key to this space is the creators, right? They are really fueling this marketplace and this growth. And there's in terms of what's exciting, I think one of the things that's really exciting is that with the latest Bitcoin upgrade, soon people will actually be able to mint NFTs on Bitcoin using the Lightning Network, right? That will be an extension of that ecosystem, of that marketplace. But I also think that it's important for people to understand that this is a tool for people not just to be consumers, for them to be the creators, the producers, because the innovation economy is fueled by micro enterprises just as much as well.
I think that's a great point. So thank you for that. And then just going back to Karen, to your question, I do think something that I've seen is the centralized exchanges. So some of the CeFi firms that we've seen, they've started to, maybe those platforms started out more so as cryptocurrencies, to allow customers to trade Bitcoin, but there's been several of those that have now offered NFT products to their customers. And they've done that, I've seen in a few different ways, through acquisitions. So maybe they acquired, an NFT platform to allow those capabilities, those types of products to their customers. And I think that they're doing that for a few different reasons. I mean, NFTs with the social networks that we have and social media platforms, there's definitely certain demographics that have been maybe more focused on NFTs. And I think that these other institutions are also trying to target to, broader sets of clients and trying to connect with, maybe younger demographics. And, there's the whole concept of transition of wealth. And so I think that, as part of gaining market share and also, not losing clients, that's driving some of the reason why, we'll continue to see some of the institutional companies becoming part of this space. And I think maybe just to add to that, a couple of other ways that I see the institutions and some of the traditional firms getting into the space, maybe through investments. So, every day I feel like I'm reading about investments that certain of those companies, whether they're, boutique investment banks or whatever they are, but they're, able to invest in these platforms that are allowing for the creation and curation of NFTs.
And so where do you see the impact of NFTs, say, on DeFi in the future? We had, where is it, where do you see it being used right now? And and later on.
And
Yeah,
I can take that one or someone.
Okay.
Okay, I can start. Is that okay? Or did you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So I would say, well, I think when we think about NFTs, I mean, I think the metadata and just the smart contract that they're built off of, that will certainly impact DeFi, and it clearly already has. And so there's marketplaces that exist that will allow for NFTs to be used as the collateral in DeFi platforms. So, if you have a borrower and a lender, the borrower can basically, use their NFT as collateral, and then the lender can decide which NFT will they accept for collateral. And then, using these automated platforms through the smart contract, if the borrower was to default, the NFT would just automatically be moved to the lender's wallet. And so that's something that I think that we've already seen, but I think that that smart contract and the programmability that the NFTs allow for, that's going to drive, that allows for interoperability. It allows for the tokenization of so many other assets. And so I think that that's something that we, will continue to see in DeFi. And then, also I think that it'll be a transition, but, traditional financial contracts, perhaps those will use the smart contract and NFT to, to be able to execute traditional contracts that exist.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that, so using NFTs as collateral for DeFi is probably, is only one that I've seen that I think it's kind of actually valuable. But that started happening since last year already, right? So this year on DeFi, I haven't seen a lot on the compelling use cases for DeFi on NFTs. So I would say overall, DeFi is on the asset side of it, right? So NFT has, to me, how I understand how we describe it, how we work with it is, so there's a product side of it, of NFT, right? So pretty much any digital product can be built into an NFT, and at the same time, it's also a digital asset, right? So DeFi is pretty much on the asset side of it. So using NFTs as a collateral definitely is natural, right? It's natural, but now the difficult part is how do you the valuation, right? So how do you verify, how much this is worth, using that as a collateral? I think, so that's the difficult part of it. But definitely that also broadens the range of, so the lending, the DeFi lending platform, like say, for example, Arcade is one typical platform who's doing that, right? And they can now one by one identify more and more digital assets in NFTs using that as collateral. So that's definitely, can say if I'm a investor, so I have NFT, collectibles as investment, and now I can use that, without even selling it. So as collateral. So that's definitely a gain for me. So there's definitely a market for that. Yeah.
And I guess this brings us into this whole conversation about regulatory policy, right? About, because that conversation leads us into, why just today, in a speech, SEC Secretary Gensler says they all look like securities to him, right? When you, for people who want to oversimplify, even when it comes to NFTs, right? NFTs are not intended to be securities. And some of the ways that, they will be leveraged will vary. But I do think, it's important within this whole larger conversation that their core is, a tool for creators and to really, a stimulator. And so I question us in terms of, this whole aspect of, how, it gets collateralized, it comes into this conversation of securities. Because I think with the compliance conversation, my only concern is for those creators, right, who are building, who now are in a very precarious regulatory landscape, that they are not, where the line is very blurred and they're not they don't even know that they're crossing a line because there's so much uncertainty about that line.
Yes, and that's a really good point. And I think, you know, to segue to some of the other questions around these the regulatory aspects and the legal aspects of it. You know, we were talking about some of the newest and most exciting NFT projects, and one of the ones that we were talking about was fractional NFTs. And Emma, you mentioned that this is something that has taken off. And do you want to talk a little about that in terms of?
Sure. Rally Road in particular has been very successful at fractionalizing Bored Apes, but this is done as a security under a PPM, which is traded on their platform. Just to follow on from what Cleve was mentioning, Gary Gensler spoke at the Practicing Law Institute this morning, and his speech is on the ST website. And he came out again very strongly that all tokens are securities, and it's a very strong message from the SEC that we can expect to see continued enforcement.
Yeah, so what are the challenges, or what and then what are things that people can do, companies, creators can do of NFTs to protect themselves? I mean, are there just some guidelines that they can follow, or what could we give them as advice? Yeah.
Well, I think in Washington, one of the ways that the industry has responded to Gensler's very aggressive approach to cryptocurrencies broadly, because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, regulation by enforcement and, you know, putting a securities lens on every, you know, token just doesn't make sense, right? So one of the ways that, you know, the industry has been working with Congress and even with the regulatory agencies is to look at, you know, to recognize the SEC absolutely has a lens towards securities, but we know the CFTC looks at cryptocurrencies as commodities, right? And they have this oversight to regulate commodities. So what the industry has come together for the large part is the fact that we need to give the CFTC greater oversight, right? Where they can have a lens of commodities, because we know the IRS looks at cryptos as properties, the CFTC as commodities, and the SEC as securities. That's that level of uncertainty is very hard for creators, especially at the micro level. So if we give greater oversight to the CFTC, the implication is they'll have a much more pragmatic approach to looking at the various asset classes and tokens and creations. And we know that, you know, the White House, their first engagement was in March, when President Biden actually called on every agency to look at their oversight, to do an assessment. And that was due to President Biden just this on Tuesday. So all of those have been submitted, and we know that that's going to come. Like, who has oversight? Where's that oversight? And to the extent that this doesn't, we can stop letting this be a conversation about Gensler's view of everything and allow other agencies like the CFTC, like Commerce, right, to actually weigh in and have a more, you know, objective assessment, and also let their oversight actually come into play, so that we're not putting creators in such a crazy environment where the rules of the game are unspoken. There's no safe haven, right? There's no regulatory sandbags. We're just approaching in Gensler's Wild Wild West.
Mm-hmm. And are there ways that people, creators and others who are, you know, for NFTs to give their opinion, give their provide their insight to these different groups? And yeah, what are the most effective ways of doing that?
All of these agencies actually have innovation offices. So the CFTC actually used to have Lab CFTC that they've streamlined into an innovation office, and SEC has SEC FinHub. And so FINRA has one. So all the regulatory agencies do have innovation offices where they can actually come in and have conversations with folks. I will say that the SEC's innovation office, I caution people before you go in there, because what we've seen is Gensler's SEC takes information and then uses it to, put out some type of enforcement notice. But I do think there are the CFTC and CFPB and FINRA and others, OCC has innovation officers that are genuinely wanting to help creators, entrepreneurs, startups, even businesses figure this thing out in a non-punitive manner. So I would say for people, they should start with those offices, but do their research first. And if they do have an attorney, speak with their attorney before engaging. But definitely, the bodies like the Blockchain Association, Coin Center, that is a think tank, are there to actually support the industry as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, as we were talking earlier about the board Jakob, which, or maybe we didn't talk about them yet, but there is the board Jakob, which grants holders the right to use their own images to sell derivative artworks. Andreessen Horowitz also announced the release of their Can't Be Evil NFT licensing terms. And so just wanted to get your take on that, Cleve and Emma, on sort of the legality of these things and whether or not it's something that we'll see more of, in the future or not.
I was on mute. I was gonna let Emma weigh in. I do think there's a lot of different approaches being presented. What I would say is this is the future frontier. We're at the starting line, and we're at the point where all options should be on the table, and we have to explore different ways. But we also have to realize this space is very polarized, right? And even within the Web3 space, there are different camps and different approaches. But I do think that it's really about, how can we work together as an industry to figure out what's best to move forward towards adoption and calm some of those voices.
Yeah, and just to add on, unless Emma was going to respond, I was just going to mention that I think it's really important, if you're an investor in NFT, just to really understand, we often say, what is the thing? So really to understand what are the rights that you're getting. And something that we see is that and we mentioned this earlier on, but sometimes there's a whole bundle of rights that you're getting. And that's important when we think about, what is this, a security or a commodity from a legal perspective, but also from an accounting perspective. That's certainly where we start. So accounting, tax related as well. It's going to be important to understand what it represents. It's how do the different rights, how are those going to be valued? What are the costs that you're incurring? So there's sort of like a whole host of considerations, but I echo your comments, Cleve. I think it's important to, do your homework and ensure that, you're working with, experts in the space that can help you interpret the guidance that there is, because there isn't, like, the guidance is evolving. And so, we're sort of at that point where we're just analogizing guidance that we have and interpreting it the best that we can as an industry.
And Emma, were you about to say something?
I think the licenses are an interesting innovation. And it's definitely something we will likely continue to see evolve.
And so going back to where we are with NFTs and the most exciting NFT projects, can you share some of the things that you've seen that you're most excited about going forward now and going forward?
I'm most excited by.
Yeah.
You go.
No, yeah, Emma, you go first. You go first.
I'm most excited by where you see a connection between real world and the NFT. Nike has an NFT which allows you to purchase a pair of trainers, and that kind of thing I find very interesting.
So since I've been always looking for use cases, so these are a few areas that I find super exciting for long run. So Cleve mentioned creators economy, right? So those are the really natural use case for NFTs, I would say, right? So anything about, you know, creating the content, right? So anything about IP, about the royalties, those should be the bread and butter for long run for industries like, you know, anything content, right? So social media, large social media, anything streaming, right? And luxury goods, you know, so those are like the ownership really has a value, right? So but then we need to work with it. So these are also the industries that, you know, has questions on who owns the IP, right? So who's the actual creator, you know, how the royalty kicks into that NFT. So these are either the legal questions or technical questions. So, you know, a lot needs to be considered to be those industries to be a mainstream in NFT industries, I would say. And then, and you mentioned fractionalized NFTs. I would say, personally, I'm really interested to see how fractionalized NFTs in real estate. And that will be a total game changer for a lot of things, right? For the entire world, I would say, because real estate has been like a best investment area, I would say, right? So, but a lot of people, just because they cannot afford to invest in any house, right? Say in the Bay Area where we are, you know, what do you do, right? So you pretty much lose all the opportunities for if you buy say, then boom, all of a sudden everybody can participate. So be a huge game changer for that kind of thing. But that has a lot to do with legal, right? So regulatory, you know, about the real world real estate laws, regulations about security tokens, you know, and then how do we actually build that into an NFT, and which is actually a different standard, different from 721 or 1150. It's actually 1400. So all this makes it will be like a super exciting long-term project, but maybe has a lot of work to do, right? And personally, I'm passionate about social impact. So I'm actually working on a new initiative about a social impact NFTs, addressing the ownership of social giving behaviors, say donations, volunteering, those kind of things now can be actually acknowledged as NFTs, you know, so it's like your social behaviors are actually now can be attached with your identity, right? So it's actually soulbound token. So if you guys actually, you know, really dig into it, identity based NFTs, soulbound tokens, social behavior now can be built into your credits, you know, so that'll be something, you know, I think it will make a great impact to the society and then drive more positivity. So those kind of things, I'm personally working on it, and we'll be excited to share updates with you guys too.
And I have a few creative projects that I'm excited about as well. So there's a project called Data, and the website is data.nyc. It's by Beatriz Ramos. She created this creator community built on Ethereum for creators globally. So data.nyc is where these creators are just doing incredible things. And, you know, they really look at it as this, you know, data genre where these creators have been, they actually minted their first NFT before Dapper Labs. But for them, it really wasn't about creating NFTs. It was about building the creator community. So I think people should definitely check them out. And also Akhu, So Micah Johnson, I remember last year, a few of us worked with him for his first drop on Nifty Gateway, Gemini's platform. And we were able to, for his Aku NFT is a simulation of a Black astronaut. And in 7 minutes, he raised $1.7 million, that because so many of us galvanized within the Black and Latino community. And so the story of Aku was so compelling that NASA reached out to Micah to get the story. And then he got a movie deal. And last month, Time magazine put Aku on the cover. So it was so great to see, a creator, create a community, and for us to galvanize around him and to go from a movie deal to the cover of Time has just been tremendous. And then there's a new platform. So we know OpenSea, right? We know all of these platforms, but a few of the, young Black and brown millennials have created this new platform called Black at, BLACKAT. And so it's intended to be a platform for millennials who are really minting their own NFTs. So what you've seen is, when you look at Black and Latino communities lead national adoption of cryptocurrency, and when you look at that data, it's really a lot of young people, right? And what they're doing is really looking at cryptos, but NFTs from this lens of ownership, of creation. So they've taken this creator community and really owned it. So when you look at the future of crypto, the future of NFTs, it's exciting, and it's really being built at the micro grassroots level. And I'm very excited about what we'll be seeing in the next few years.
Maybe just to add on a couple points. So I think what I'm excited about is the immersive experiences that will be created through the NFTs, through the metaverse, which we talked a little bit about, but then also just the DAOs that are created. So the decentralized autonomous organizations, and the smart contract of the NFTs can be used to fund these DAOs. But I think, the way that I think about DAOs is sort of like the counterpart of corporations in the DeFi world. And that's really, giving power to the members and the participants to vote on, different protocols and just, how that organization is going to work. And I think that's really interesting. There's many different use cases and examples of different DAOs that we've seen, but that's definitely a trend that I think is exciting, and I think we'll continue to see that.
Someone from the chat, Don, mentioned the certificates. Yeah, so that's actually a great area. I personally think that will be a hard demand utility, like all the certificates today, like say school, like degree certificates, right? You graduated from Stanford, what if you lost it, right? So you can't even prove that you graduated, and then driver's license, I think the entire DMV should be NFTified, but the questions about this area will be, is that really going to happen? I mean, should it happen? I think it totally should, right? But is it going to happen, or when is it going to happen? A lot of times it's probably more political than anything else, right? So technical wise, it's super easy. We can just make an NFT out of it in no time. But that's more of a political issue, I would say. That takes the entire society to take part into this ecosystem, right? So otherwise, this adoption it's hard to happen. So those are the things, but we are that'll be. I mean, but here and there we hear, oh, there's a school in Singapore, so they issue NFT certificate, a school in Korea. So those countries, they are probably more open. For the digital assets, or regulation-wise more relaxed. But so we'll watch that area. Like personally, I do agree, Don, that should happen. Yeah, that should happen. Another area that I would add on will be carbon credits. So what is not related to the carbon emission, right? So almost everything, every industry, so you will have some sort of carbon footprint, and then that will be the ultimate thing, ultimate thing on NFTs, to my understanding. Now, with the NFTs, you can actually address the ownership, who actually did how much impact, right? So that will be so interesting, see how, like the carbon credits now already, you can buy that from the market, like that. So I think that'll be a really big area to watch. And then and yeah, so that's also part of the social impact that I mentioned, right? So I will be really closely, watch that and see how that's evolved. Yeah.
And I think one of the points that you made in terms of even, the certificate piece, I think one of the, we're at the starting point, but we have to realize that consumers are really going to drive this, right? Because every time we've seen a use case really gain adoption, is because there was a natural consumer base, natural audience that had a pain point, right? Let's face it, right? NFTs is not the great invention. The great invention is the fact that all these creators already exist. All of these different, groups that actually had this pain point already existed. And once the tool was created, they were able to adapt it. Even when you look at, excuse me, I live near a police station and a gas station. That's what you get for living in DC. But even when you look at Bitcoin, right, as a store of value, when you look at, custody services coming up and service, and products and services for investors, right? So I think in this space, even as we look at the future of NFTs, it's really consumers, it's really the public that's going to drive that adoption. And to the extent that we keep building around where consumers need a solution, need a fix, that's where we're going to see the greatest impact.
Yeah.
And Erica, you mentioned luxury brands. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was just, thank you, Karen. I was just responding to Don's comment regarding the authentication that NFTs can provide. And I think there's multiple use cases. I think we talked about some of them, but that already are being used by certain brands. And I think that I saw that, luxury brands are using it to basically authenticate or to validate the authenticity of their bag. So I'm not saying that Fendi's using it. This is just an example, but Fendi can use it to just prove that is a Fendi bag. I mean, I live in Manhattan. There's several on certain street corners downtown Canal Street. There's vendors that are selling lookalike bags all the time, and so that's just one example that I've seen. But I think it can certainly be used to I think there's another use case around even airplane parts and for secondary sales. And so I think that the point is that the smart contract will allow for that in multiple industries and situations.
Yeah, like you said, right? So eBay just recently announced that they're building on Polygon for NFTs. So that doesn't even have to be luxury brands, right? So secondary used goods, right? So consignment stores, the real, right? So for a long time they were talking with them. I mean, they got into exactly the lawsuit, right? About that, who owns this item, right? So is the thing, so anywhere that really needs to address the ownership of something, NFTs will show the big value, right?
Yes, all very great thoughts there, and look forward to tracking all these use cases as we go forward. Now, to just come back to where some of the challenges have been with NFTs and in crypto in general, we've seen over the last year a number of attacks and hacks, and this has cost the industry billions of dollars. And NFTs in particular, some cases are vulnerable because if they're being used, like we talked about earlier, as an asset, or if, even if, like in the case of Bill Murray, there's crypto that's being used to purchase or exchanged, for the NFTs, there could be just a lot of risk involved because of these attacks, and also scams. Right, there have been a lot of NFT related scams recently. So, wanted to get your thoughts on that. Certainly, we have been looking at this problem, or I've been looking at this problem for a while from a couple of perspectives. One is just looking at tracking the NFTs that have been, say, the assets themselves that have been stolen, and tracking that through the transfer of ownership. And there are a lot of tools to address that sort of transactional analysis or monitoring, and that's great. What I do see is missing in the market today is a look also, along with that transactional risk analysis, an attack risk analysis. And that's because a lot of these NFTs, like we talked about before, are part of as far as smart contracts and code that is basically out there, open source, available for a lot of developers as well as hackers to see. And because they're out there and it's in the open, it's easier to, say, find vulnerabilities because it's all out there. And then once those vulnerabilities are identified, then they can, the bad actors can quickly go in and use automation and other things to just take a lot of money out. And we've seen that, right, where hundreds of millions of dollars worth of crypto and assets and tokens have been stolen. So just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Has this come up as an issue in the organizations, the creators that you've spoken to, and have there been some general recommendations about what to do?
Well, for the Blockchain Foundation, risk education is a big priority for us, right? We know that right now there's a lot of FOMO, there's a lot of folks, excited to get into the market, but we also know that the industry does have, a lot of information to help empower folks to make better decisions. So I do think that, we need, well, that is the role that the Blockchain Foundation will play, is, an industry-wide, where it doesn't matter your protocol or your community. We're planning to create a virtual digital assets public library where the industry will provide that content. Because right now, the only source for people to get information is YouTube, right? And unless they go from, company to company or protocol from protocol. So for the Blockchain Foundation, we definitely recognize the need for a central point of information, of trusted content from reputable sources, but also to make sure that people are aware of the resources available to mitigate risks. For the Blockchain Foundation, we'll actually be launching later this month an initiative to encourage the industry to, really focus on risk education and make sure that consumers, investors, are able to get information, basic information, the fundamentals quickly and easily.
Great. Yes. And that's wonderful. Love that. And would be happy to work with you on that and provide any information you need there, because I had the similar experience, would go from protocol to protocol, look at all the attacks, and then find some similarities across them. And recently, I'd say in the last year, for a lot of the attacks that I've seen with NFTs and other tokens, is first in stolen private keys. So basically credentials that have been pulled out, swiped.
Right.
And that's often because whatever computer app, mobile app, whatever it is that they're using has been compromised. Yes, so cold storage is better, but a lot of people still will use their computer or their mobile app to manage, a lot of their tokens. And then exchanges and institutions themselves also have a lot of hot wallets that have been broken into. And so that's one area that I think is very important to protect, is obviously that confidential private key information. The other, and then ways that people can access it. The other thing that I've seen a lot of is tampering or changing a wallet. So being able to go in and say, find a vulnerability in a smart contract, but then change the address to the hacker's address. And so there are ways to protect against this. You actually can make the environment you're using, more tamper proof, more self-defending. And so there are vendors out there, like ours, that like my company, where we can help protect that environment from these kinds of, tampering or attempts to change the actual code. But a lot of it is, like you said, Cleve, is understanding that. And I think a lot of regulators are learning about that, learning how smart contracts work and how their vulnerabilities. A lot of companies are realizing, there are, in our need for speed and our need to quickly get adoption, we may be, going past some of these checks faster than we should. And it's important to understand, what we're doing and slow down sometimes and fix those types of issues.
And even if we may not be able to slow. Oh, I'm sorry. Go on. I've spoken so much.
So I'll just add on that. So what I heard from you guys are also from maybe the trading platforms, right? From the exchanges, from the consumer perspective. I can add on maybe from the enterprises, from brands. Now they build their products into NFTs at large scale, right? So they also need to be very careful about how they set up their smart contracts, right? When it's, because now that's actually their product. So behind that is the setup for payment, right? So is how you store your data storage plan, and custody, right? Key management and wallet solutions. So working, of course, so working with infrastructure platforms like the NFT breweries, what we always do is to come up with the plan, like a specific plan with the business, what is the best solution for you, right? So each brand, each business has a unique need, right? So really break down that process, so for each step, for each one, behind your product, it's critical, right? So each one should serve a purpose for your business, for your scale, for your readiness, for your audience, right? So I would say that's really important to understand the every piece of the infrastructure.
Yeah, because there's a solution for kind of every aspect that you need to address, right? Like you're talking about before, if there's a problem with the mobile wallet, like recently there was a Solana wallet, Slope wallet, that was hacked into, and it was because their private keys in the mobile wallet itself were not protected, and those private keys then got moved over to a server where they were in the clear, meaning everybody could see it. So anybody who could get in could see everything. And that's really scary. And that's one of those things where, okay, there is a solution for that. You can encrypt those keys, and it's not, insurmountable. It's a very doable thing to address. You just have to know about doing it. And so just like you're saying, just break down each part, whether it's, okay, we need to protect the data, encrypt the data, or we need to prevent people from being able to hack in. There are tools, there are ways to go about doing that, or preventing that kind of thing from happening, and just breaking it down step by step. You don't have to do it all at once. Definitely can do it in stages, and but it's important to go through that either through the Blockchain Foundation or resources like that, or companies such as yourself and other vendors that are out there.
And I would say, I do think that, there's a train that the industry is on, you can't stop it, right? So I think that's one of the reasons we see that for the foundation, the distinction for us is the industry's focus on adoption, we're focused on accessibility. Because the reality is we have to have the conversation about self-custody, right? Self-custody is important. It's boring, it's not sexy, nobody wants to hear it, but we have to have an entity that's saying, yes, 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 we have to do it. And then also we have to be able to, start those tutorials, right? Start those engagements. And then what we've noticed with the foundation is we need custody services for the middle class, right? Because right now, most of the custody services are for the wealthy or high net worth investors, right? But we know just regular middle class people may not be interested in learning how to self-custody their tokens and their cryptocurrencies. So we need to talk to financial institutions to realize that this is maybe a riskier demographic when it comes to custody, and it may not be high net worth, but there's a market there. So, all of that is important, especially as we look at the growth of an NFT market that booms and to cover some of those vulnerabilities.
Right, exactly. And the companies and the organizations are recognizing that, right? Exchanges are recognizing that they're protecting their end users. They're paying, when something happens, they are paying back the funds. And they're recognizing they have to beef up their environments for their users. But I totally agree. There's got to be, a broader solution for middle class people, not just the high earners. Yes, and there's a common social recovery of wallets will hopefully help with that.
Yeah. Luckily that there are like new solutions, especially on wallets, it's coming out every day, right? So it's evolving so quickly. Now, we don't even need a wallet to claim an NFT, not claim NFT, to get an NFT, before you claim it. So that's how people are onboarding the new users, right? So newer solutions are coming out every day, so same thing with the storage, same thing with the payment, right? So many companies are trying to disrupt the current, the fintech setup for fiat crypto gateways. So that's all really good to see, right? So I can totally see that, so all these problems will be one by one solved. All these barriers will be one by one taken out of the way, and then that's when the large adoption will happen, right?
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, any other final thoughts here before we wrap up? Okay. Well, if not, I want to thank you all very much for joining today. It was a wonderful discussion. We'll have this recorded and you can share that with your networks, and please let me know if there are any other topics that you'd like to discuss for our next session. It was a wonderful time today. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Right
Bye.
here. Thanks.